Story 1. My parents always used the police as the bogeyman when I was a child. Whenever I heard sirens, my parents would say, "They are coming to get you," regardless of whether it was an ambulance or police. I was a child. I didn't know the difference between the sounds. One day, I heard sirens, so I shouted police while my parents were driving. They yelled at me and called me a liar. I got punished when I got home for lying. It wasn't the police, it was an ambulance. As a kid, I thought they were the same. A couple of days later, my father asked me to rinse the dishes. I figured this was an odd request, but I had just been punished, so I was going to comply. My parents had this terrible habit of leaving all the dishes in the sink for a couple of days. I did exactly as he asked me to and rinsed the dishes, no soap, no scrubbing, just rinsing. As my parents were starting to serve dinner, they noticed that the dishes smelled a little off, and they were wondering why there were little flakes on the dishes. I was the only person that had a different plate on the table because I wanted my plate actually clean. After my parents and my sisters started eating, I told my dad that it was such a strange request that he wanted me to only rinse the dishes. I wished I could do that from now on because it saves me time from washing them. Everyone just dropped their food in disgust. My mom looked over to my dad and asked him why in the world he told me to only rinse the dishes. My dad said that he meant wash. I called him a liar. Subsequently, I got punished again. It was worth it. Story 2. I was employed at a rather large factory, which is one of the largest plant-based companies in the world, recently bought by an investment firm not so long ago. I developed a program which was used at the factory. It could tell whenever any machines were not running, even if it was due to a manual stop or anything else. My program knew the reason why the machine was idling. This program made it so much easier for the entire factory. Workers were happy because they didn't need to do any manual work and write down every time the machine stopped. About a year ago, the factory appointed a new chief. All the old employees in leadership positions were let go because it was time for new blood to come in. There was a lot of talk about selling off parts of the factory, including machines and so on. This included programs that I had developed, including the program that identified whenever a machine stopped. I developed this program in my spare time, showed it to the old management, and they liked it enough that they wanted to use it on every station in the factory. Every machine was to use this program. All that had to be done was for the program to be maintained weekly. This was around 5 years ago or so. When the newly appointed factory chief wanted to let the old employees, myself included, leave, it was not known that I was the person behind that program. At my meeting with Human Resources and the factory chief, I said that I was willing to sell them the program and teach someone how to maintain it. The factory chief laughed in my face and said it was company property and that it was simply their program and not mine. I offered to show them the source code and everything, but it led to the point where if I was to tamper with the program before my departure, they would sue me. I was officially let go. A 2-month countdown began, and after 2 months, I was free. After a week or so, they noticed problems with the program. It would stop loading, stop registering stops, and it would mislabel stops. I knew that this was when the fun was about to begin. After a month, I was called into the office and was told that I had tampered with the program because it had suddenly stopped working. I let them know that someone had to maintain it. I was ordered to teach someone how to do that job, and I told them, "After you pay me for the program rights." They wouldn't budge, and I was told to return to work. When I had a week left, I strolled around the factory floor for a while and noticed that no stations were running my program anymore. I asked some operators why that was, and they told me that it just stopped working. Now we need to fill out forms every time the machine stops manually. I shrugged and told them to thank the factory chief. I left after that week and got a phone call about a month after I left where they begged me to sell them the rights and teach someone how to maintain it. I never sold them that program. Instead, I sold an improved version to another factory nearby, where I am now employed. I see some are saying that I am in the wrong based on United States law. I'm just editing here to let you know that this did not take place in the United States. I made the program during my spare time at home on my own computer. After introducing the program to the former factory chief, I was allowed to try it out on one machine and test it. The maintenance was done on my office computer. After a few months, I was allowed to roll it out for the entire factory. It wasn't done overnight. There was lots of debugging to do. I have not heard anything from the company for nearly a year, so it would be weird for them to suddenly come after me now. I just wanted to make that clear. Story 3. One of my law school professors was a public defender and attorney who represents poor criminal defendants in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Before he came to my school, he told me a story about a particularly uptight sexist male judge and a fiery female public defender who did exactly what he asked. Court begins. The attorney walks in, wearing a conservative pantsuit that wouldn't be out of place in any courtroom in America. The judge, an old man, raises his voice, points his finger at the attorney, and says, "Do not come back into my courtroom until you are properly dressed. Women do not wear pants in my courtroom." The attorney does not respond. She simply walks out of the courtroom. A few minutes later, she returns, wearing her suit jacket, and that's it. You see, her jacket was cut long, so by itself, it fell to a little bit above her knees. She simply walked into the restroom, took off her pants, and came back to court. The judge never enforced that women cannot wear pants requirement in his courtroom again. Story 4. This popped into my mind recently. I used to work at a retail tropical fish store, and weird as it is, we were very well known. We used to provide the aquarium with rare fish, and people used to drive from 2-3 states over if they were true fish people to come buy from us. I, at the time, a 17-year-old female, was an expert in tropical fish and koi. In fact, it was my job that summer to be the koi and outdoor pond point person. And my job was not only stocking the ponds but managing all the plants, caring for them, and knowing every bit of information and all the prices of the various koi and goldfish we had. I knew diets, temperature ranges, places of origin, special breeds. I knew it all. They even would call me with questions on my days off. That clearly did not matter to one customer, though. He came inside the store and asked for some help with koi outside. I happily agreed as I was the only person not on my lunch break. Now, this guy frankly seemed put off by me offering to help. So instead of buying anything, he decided to quiz me for 20 minutes about the koi, goldfish, and pond plants to try to get me to admit I didn't know something. I answered every single one of his silly questions. Some really were silly. And at the end of the 20 minutes, he had the nerve to say, "Can I talk to someone who knows things? Like a man?" Full emphasis in tone on those words, too. "Sure you can," I say with a fake smile. "Let me get John for you." Here's the malicious compliance. John, name changed, was 75, retired, annoying as heck, and so crazy. My boss didn't even want him to be hired, but he owed John a favor. Now John is an expert in goldfish, but he hates koi and outside ponds. John, also, like I said, is really annoying and crazy, but he had a soft spot for me, so we always would chat. I went inside to find John and explained to him that this customer wanted a man to talk to. John asked me why he wanted to speak to a man when I was the pond point person, and I told him that he clearly just didn't like that he was speaking to a girl. John nods knowingly, gets this evil grin on his face, and goes to help the customer. 5 minutes later, I hear a man yelling in the parking lot. I run outside and find the customer screaming at John and cursing him out. "What is wrong with you? Does nobody know anything around here? I will never come back. You're all horrible and know nothing about fish, and you're a terrible employee," or something to that effect. I watch the guy hop into his car, slam the door, and drive off. I asked John what happened. He said, "Oh yeah, no, every time he asked me a question, I said not sure." Good question though. I could go get OP and ask. She's really our pond expert, and apparently he did not like that. Customer, if you read and remember this, forget you. Thanks for reading. Story 5. Post offices in Canada are maddening places to visit, a kind of time warp bubble where even the simplest of actions, like sending a letter, can take 3-4 more steps than necessary. The people working in them seem pleasant enough, but heaven help you if you want to drop in and quickly send a package. My malicious compliance takes place in one such small town post office where 2 employees work, post office guy and post office lady. I have a small business, and my customers will sometimes request priority 2-day express shipping to the United States of America. This is a very expensive service that has 2 large customs forms that take about 10 minutes to fill out. You have to press hard with your pen, so it goes through all 6 carbon copies. In the past, I've requested these forms to take home where I can fill them out ahead of time. So when I get to the counter, my parcel is ready to go and can be processed quickly. Nice and efficient. However, after my last shipment, the post office guy refused to give me new forms to take home. When I asked him why, I was told, "It's our policy not to give out forms ahead of time." I replied that I've received them before and it saves everyone a lot of time, to which he replied, "Next time you're in, talk to the post office lady. It's her policy." I was then told to leave the line, go fill out my forms, and come through the line again. The next time I shipped a 2-day express parcel, I went through the line, and this time I was greeted by the post office lady, and she began to enter my package. She measures it all up, weighs it, and enters it all into her computer. Then she asked me how I want to send it, to which I replied, 2-day priority, please. She proceeded to sigh, turn around, retrieve my customs forms, hand them to me, and then tell me to go to the side counter and fill these out and come back. Afterwards, I asked her if I could please get extra copies of the form, to which she replied that they can't give those forms out ahead of time. When I asked why, she just glared at me and said, "It's our policy." My small and petty act of malicious compliance is that from now on, every time I have a priority 2-day parcel, I intentionally and patiently wait for her to measure it, weigh it, enter it into her system, and ask me how I would like to ship the package before putting on my biggest mischievous grin and declaring, "Priority 2-day please." She rolls her eyes, gets me the forms, sends me to my paperwork corner, and then has to delete all the data she just entered into her computer before she can help the next customer. Today was especially delicious. I had 2 packages, one to be sent via regular mail, the second via 2-day priority. I, of course, put down the regular mail package first, let her enter it all into her system. She even printed the label, then let her go through entering the second package, only to gleefully declare 2-day priority please, and watch her have to undo all the work she just did and get me my forms. It's petty, it wastes everyone's time, but somehow it makes visiting the post office just a little bit more enjoyable. I tried the online forms. They work for every other shipping method except priority 2-day. If I'm shipping via any other method, I always fill out my forms online ahead of time. I'm not a complete jerk, but they won't work with priority. So silly. Story 6. This was about 5 years ago when I, 21 at the time, was working at a major bank in a position that had me making calls and verifying credit card activity. We were expected to make 8 calls per hour, assuming most calls will probably go to voicemail. It was mindless, and I was almost always under the influence of recreational substances, but still ended up being a high performer and making easily 11-12 calls per hour. My boss, let's call him Cole, loved me. He started having me train newcomers and brought me to lunch with some up-and-coming managers. This was a big deal to my career, so when he started flirting with me, I mostly brushed it off and went on with my day, creating new materials, helping colleagues with random questions, and still making a huge amount of calls. Cole and I were both being recognized for the team's efforts. Then, he brought me to his office, which stinks. It's not a smell I've ever smelled before and haven't since, but needless to say, it's a smelly smell that smells smelly, like an old pair of wet socks that were wrung out onto the carpet. On this particular stinky day, Cole asks me to close the door behind him and gives me this smile that still gives me chills. He starts to unbutton his shirt, saying it's hot in there. "Oh, isn't it hot? You should get undressed too." I stormed out. No way was I dealing with that. I went through a bit of a depression and immediately looked for other jobs, contributing less and less every day until I wasn't speaking to any colleagues except the cool ones who knew what was happening. Here's where malicious compliance comes in. Every hour, I would spend 20-40 minutes making 8 calls, and then turning off my computer and starting playing crosswords or drawing pictures, or using my phone in the bathroom until the hour was up. Cole noticed very quickly that I was doing the absolute bare minimum and called me into a meeting. I willed myself to go without calling human resources, and he was threatening to write me up for my bad moods and not working hard enough. I looked him dead in the eyes and asked if he thought it was hot in here, and he immediately starts bursting into excuses. Oh, you're misinterpreting things and the like. I told him I wasn't misinterpreting anything, and he snaps back that I am losing out on an excellent opportunity. I pull out my phone and stop recording. Thank him for his time, see the red fall out of his face, and then continue on what I'm doing for the next month while I find a new job in the company. From what I know, he quit shortly thereafter and doesn't have a Facebook or LinkedIn to show where he is currently. I have no plans to release the recording but still have it just in case.